Hello, this is another video for Pandemic Talk. This is Dustin DaHusky, and I have another subject to talk with you guys. And I'm an automotive nerd. I'm a gearhead. I love cars, old, new. Doesn't matter how many wheels it has, doesn't matter how much rust it has, doesn't matter how old or new. I enjoy cars. It's something I've always enjoyed as a pup-hoosk, and something I've always appreciated and enjoyed. I even own a classic car. Actually, it's a family car from new, so it's something special about that that's kind of gotten me into it is growing up in the 90s with a 60s car. It's not something someone my age can easily say. Normally, a lot of furs my age tend to grow up in a car about a decade prior to their birth. Sometimes their folks have owned a car, might be a used car still, but maybe less than 10 years old and how old they are, and grew up with something like that. It's kind of cool when I get to tell people, oh, well, you grew up in the 60s and your parents had a 60s car. Well, I was born in 93. And grew up in a 67 Skylark. Oh, and you think you're so special. Oh. It is what it is. I grew up working class, so you had what you had. Apparently my dad had a 70s car, but I never actually rode in it. It was his work car that was a total junker. A 74 Buick Century. We had a lot of Buicks. We had a lot of boats growing up in the suburbs of Milwaukee where it's not conducive for city parking. Well, not really suburbs of the city. But still, if you've ever been to West Dallas, you know that finding parking is not easy. So if you can parallel park a boat of a car, you're doing pretty good. But I've always enjoyed cars. And I'm going on. So I had a 96 Cavalier. That rusted in half. That broke in half while I was driving. And I've met a lot of people in the furry fandom locally in the States. Sometimes, like, the very first time they've ever met another furry is me in that car. So a lot of people associate that car with good times until I told them it broke in half, and they say, wait, we drove everywhere in that car. I'm like, yeah. Then I had an '07 Kia Spectra. Really changed my mind about Korean cars. Turns out they're great value for money. I'd always trust them. Very, very simple to fix. Everything's 10, 12, 14, or 16 millimeters, so you know what? If you had just those four sizes of metric wrenches, sockets, whatever, you're doing good. Whereas my Cavalier was both standard and metric, which was even more confusing. Skylark is all standard, so I don't have to worry about that so much. There's not a metric bolt on that car, so you know what? Kind of glad about that. My Korean cars is all metric. Then I got a 2016 Kia Forte 5 hatchback. I've always wanted to get a hatchback anyway. That's the end goal, because you know what? It's more conducive to go to conventions with. It's good to have opening rear hatch. Put your fursuit bins, put your luggage in. It's just more easier of a car. For those who have never been to a convention or new to conventions or long-time convention goer, you'll notice that a lot of furry cars in the parking lot, whether by vanity plate or stickers, you can certainly tell one of us is a furry is usually by those things alone. But you notice that a lot of furries either drive a hatchback, station wagon, an SUV, or a truck, something where you can haul a lot of stuff going to conventions, because we tend to carpool. So it's nice to have a car that we can actually put stuff in the back, have a few other people with us, and then go along the drive across the country. Really a lot of fun. If you've not carpooled with furries before, boy, it's an interesting experience. But I've always wanted a hatchback. The sedan is kind of a dead thing to me. I think the only other car that'll always continue owning is that Skylark. So it's a very traditional looking car. It's a coupe. Still, it's a hardtop sedan. Actually, no. Technically, that's a hardtop coupe. If it was a pillared model, it'd be called a two-door sedan. Aha, see, now there's always a technicality to stuff like that. But hatchbacks are certainly the way to go. I convince a lot of furries and people to get a hatchback because it's just more practical. Americans love the perennial sedan. But I tell people, yeah, but the rear glass will lift up in a hatchback. You can put a lot more stuff in there. Hatchback is kind of the way to go. Even as SUV, rear back hatch, just easier to get stuff in and out. You can hold a lot of cargo between a Kia Forte sedan and a Kia Forte 5 hatchback. There is more interior cargo room for the hatchback version, and it is a shorter car. It's a shorter version of the same car, and yet it can hold more cargo than the sedan version if you just didn't use the rear seats. Full-on cargo, you get, I think, 10 or 15% more cargo room, which doesn't seem like a whole lot much, but believe me, when you're helping move someone, that extra 15% really comes pretty handy. So, the whole main subject of this video today, or this episode, is buying a car in the COVID-19 world, 2020 pandemic season. And I gotta tell you this right now, it's a buyer's market. Back in March, when this whole pandemic happened, there was already a 6% hit on every single current car on the road and on dealer lots right now for value. Regardless of what you bought your car before, which I bought my car last September, so before COVID, although I got a really good deal for it, but that's because it sat on the lot for 3 months. Dealer didn't actually do anything with my car. They didn't even actually put the dealer vinyl logo on the back glass or in the back trunk lid like they always do, and I always rip them off anyway, because you know what? Unless I'm getting paid for that advertising, I rip that shit out, because you know what? Unless you're paying me, I don't need to tell anyone who I bought my car from. So, I had a good deal for my car. It's got one paint blemish. That's something I'll fix for another year. I was going to do it this year, but pandemic and still paying off this car. Got a few more months. It'll wait for another year. I'm not too worried. But if I let paint blemishes go for far too long, bite me in the ass later. And I should know, because I've owned a lot of rusty cars, to know what it will do to a car in time in Wisconsin, because Wisconsin climate's not great to cars as they age. So, you're in the market for a newer car or a brand new car. You own any model of car, SUV, truck, whatever, and you're looking to maybe get better gas mileage, or you're looking to upgrade, or you're a furry, and you love going to conventions, and then you realize your coupe or your sedan you have discovered is not conducive for carpooling with other furries, getting your fursuit bin in the back trunk area or in the back seat if it's a coupe, because sometimes it's a pain in the ass. Whatever reason that you are looking for a car, I will gladly tell you this. There is no better time to start looking for a car than right now, especially in the upcoming year where, COVID-19's probably still going to be an issue then. Car factories have actually stopped producing vehicles for anywhere from a few weeks to several months. There's even some factories around the world and in the country that have not actually tooled back up to make more cars, which means the production numbers of cars for 2020 is going to be certainly a lot less than previous years in the past. Not only that, dealerships don't like when a car sits on their lot for far too long. They would rather prefer to use that spot for a better selling vehicle, or would rather just see the cars fly off their lots so they can get more cars that's more profitable because they're brand new cars. Yeah, they have used car lots, but even still, they want to have any car, regardless of what it is, how old it is, they want it off their lots at some point, because a car sitting doesn't help anyone. Even a brand new car sitting 2 years on a lot will actually do more damage to the car than if it were just be bought off the lot and it's being used. Because my Skylark, it's almost like a warship. I can mothball that thing, and as I've done before, can let that thing sit for 10 years and it'll start right up without a problem. It's an older car. There's not much there's no computer in it anyway. There's not much to go wrong with an older car. Yeah, it shouldn't sit, but it can handle sitting for a long time. New cars, you don't want to have a car sit for longer than a year without it being fully used. Yeah, you can go for half a year. Yeah, you could leave a car for a year if you had to go somewhere outside the country for your job. Keep your car over at your folks for that time until you come back. That's not so much a bad thing, but you may have to do brake. You may have to resurface your brake rotors, maybe your drums, just to keep them nice and smooth, so that way you're not running on terrible brakes, because eventually brakes are the very first things to go on a car that sits for far too long. And then, of course, fuel goes bad. Engine, transmission, and axle components, depending on what kind of car you have. The highest points of those units are going to dry up, which may cause surface rust to a certain degree, which for a year, slight surface rust, not going to do a whole lot much, but certain seals on the upper ends of these units can actually dry out, and you have potential problems down in the future because eventually they will leak. And past a year, you're looking at a lot of problems. You can rejuvenate a car by turning the engine over, at least regularly. If you can at least turn the engine over here and there, get the engine oil circulated, perfect, fine. But on these lots, a lot of these lots, the dealerships, they don't like to do stuff. They don't like to play around with cars if they don't need to. If they don't have the time, they won't do it. They will not go out of their way to wash cars parked outside, because you know what? That's not their job. Unless it is a car that they're going to prepare for someone to look at, that's the only time they do it, is when they know that someone's going to look at that exact car. Well, car values have dropped anywhere. Okay, I'm stumbling. I think it's time for a little bit of coffee. A nice dark roast. And it won't wire me up because I've been too used to caffeine for so many years, decades. It doesn't affect me. It's just a drink, which is nice. So, car values of all cars, unless it's a classic car, because in this climate, the only thing that's increasing in value is exotic cars, classic cars, antique cars. That's still climbing up. That don't change. Modern, used, and new cars, well, their values are dropping right now because factories, they're not making any more, or they're not making as many as they could because the climate out there, people are not in a buying mood. They're more worried about keeping their homes, keeping their apartments. They have better things to worry about than buying a new car. So, you know what? Okay, so manufacturers are not actually making as many new cars as they could. So, what does that mean for dealerships? Well, a lot of these cars are going to be sitting on lots because, manufacturers know they don't need to make as many cars this year because people are not in a buying mood. So, you know what they're going to do? They'll have a small trickle of new cars being made. Unless, popular models are still being sold well, that's the only exception. And even that, even the highest selling models, trucks, even their production is down by like 20%. So it's still a big hit. So these cars are sitting. Dealerships want to certainly get rid of them within 3 months. 3 months is kind of their max. That's when they really, really want to get rid of them. They have a huge price differential regarding just hey, this car is selling for $18,000, maybe a few-year-old car. We'll give it to you for $12,000 just to get it off the lot. You might be able to actually find some really good deals on slightly used and brand new cars. Just because they're not moving as fast as they used to a year before. cars are actually sitting on the lots for longer. Some cars haven't even been touched, again, as I mentioned before, for a few years, which they all know these cars have problems because they've not been moved much. They're brand new cars, low mileage, less than maybe even 100 miles. It's just, they sit, and it doesn't do them any good if they sit. If you're looking for a car, truck, SUV, whatever you're in the market to buy, or even a used car from several years old to even a decade old, you can still find a good deal today, right now, because if you're going to a dealership, you're going to get a better deal than buying it privately off of Craigslist, Facebook Market, whatever tends to float your boat. You can probably get a better deal right now through a dealership than you would actually finding it private hand. So between 6 to 14% price reduction for cars on a dealership lot. That's pretty good if you think about it. That's some good savings off the bat. You can even, and you know what, the classic rule, or the classic act of haggling. You could still haggle, and you know what, they might still, if you can get even $1,000 off a sticker price, or not sticker price, but dealer price already discounted, and if they're in the mood just to get rid of the car, you might be able to wax off some money off that price, which is good for your finances, because that's less you have to pay. I got $8,000 off my car, off of one paint blemish, and just because they wanted to get the car off the lot. Hey, I just happened to swoop in and pick the car up for even less than what I probably would have paid for. And you know what? That's literally, was it $6,000 or $8,000? No, sorry. It was $6,000 I didn't have to pay for my car. So, you know what? That's perhaps 6 less months I'd have to pay on it. So I got a good deal even before the pandemic, although that's because cars, they just simply wanted to get off. Most people buy SUVs, trucks these days, which I don't understand why. Such a big vehicle, unless you live on a farm or you have a big family, if you own a bigger vehicle and it's just you, I don't know how useful it really could be if you don't ever use the space. Unless you do use the space, then that's one thing. But buy yourself a car, buy yourself a small SUV, and call it done. Right now is a good time to buy a car, even though it doesn't seem like it. If you have a very steady job, you're looking to get something newer, hey, definitely take a look at your local dealers. See what's on the lot, see what you're in the mood to buy. Well, if you're in the mood to buy anyway, you're in the mood to buy. Find what's actually on these lots that would interest you, and then take a look at them. Don't be afraid to haggle on price, to say, hey, would you do 1,000 less? Some of these dealerships just want to get rid of these cars, because a lot of them have been sitting for a long time. It's not a bad idea, because once the pandemic is over, manufacturing is going to be back to what it was. It may take a few years, but by the time it comes back, then it's the seller's market. Then you're kind of getting screwed over, because now, once it's over, the economy is a bit more firm-footed, and people aren't losing their jobs, their homes, and whatnot. Then that's when the seller's market for used and new cars will be in their advantage. So if you're looking for a car right now, hey, it's not a bad time to look. I'm not a salesman by any degree, but I definitely know when's a good time to at least look at a car and buy. And right now, it's really not a bad time. In fact, I kind of wish I could have maybe perhaps waited another year. But then again, some cars for a good deal don't last long. So if you don't look in time on some of these cars, on some of these deals, you're going to be too late. because these deals don't really last a whole long, because people are thinking of the same thing. So if you're in the market to look for new car, slightly new car that's used, or a really used car, 6+ years old, maybe less than 10. At that point, past 10 years old, you can still find a good car for that. You might be expecting to put more work into it because it's getting a bit older. You don't know much the history of the car, unless it's got a Carfax, and you definitely know, and you have a better idea of what you're going to do with this car, or if you just needed transportation for a while until you start looking for a better car, whatever. It's a pretty good time to start looking. If you are in the market, I would say the next upcoming year is going to be good time, because I don't see manufacturers producing cars like they have a year ago. So yeah, take a look at that. You might find a pretty good prospect if your employment is quite steady enough that you don't have to worry about it, because nothing's worse than buying a car, then realize your steady employment may be becoming a bit more shaky, and it's kind of a risk. It's a risk that if you're willing to take. But yeah, give it a shot. So just something to talk about. Something I've definitely noticed over the past year is that there's never been a better time to buy since the Great Recession of 07, 08, 09. Cars have never been at discount like this since then, and probably won't be for a long while after, because I think after this pandemic, things are going to be back to a seller's market, not a buyer's market. Definitely take advantage of that, because these opportunities don't happen that often, maybe once every decade. So you might get the steal of not a lifetime, but of a decade right now. So I thought I'd just kind of talk about it. So we'll see you guys next time.